Hey everybody, I'm not here today, of course, but you do have a guest teacher, so please make sure that things go smoothly and that you are doing what you can to make things great for our guest teacher. Today is day 7 of our unit. I'm over at the district office right now doing some work with some LA teachers. And today on our agenda, we're going to read a poem, we're going to do a formative mood check, and then we're also going to do some work on our summative poetry assessment, which I'll remind you of in just a little bit here. On Monday, we are going to have a poetry test. So you want to make sure that you know all those poetry terms and you're able to kind of tell me about them on a test and kind of identify some of those different types of figurative language is what you'll see. Really nothing that we haven't been doing already for this unit. So just know that I'm going to test you on Monday, and I would study those poetry terms if you need a little refresher on anything before Monday. Also on Monday, I will give you the final results of our Sundown Showdown. Since I'm not here today, I want to be there for that, and that'll be happening on Monday. The coffee house is next week on Wednesday. If you would like to sign up for any decorations or any treats or anything else, check that out on my board and sign yourself up. Remember that we want to bring any treats that are store-bought and not made at home, and also think about any nut allergies with that. Okay, please be kind, courteous, respectful, and helpful to our teacher today, our guest teacher. Show pride, show class, you represent Edina. What we're going to do today is, first of all, read a poem. I'll talk about that in just a second. Do want to remind you the rest of our time after we're done with our poem stuff is going to be working on our summative assessment for this unit. I've showed you this before, but I want to just remind you that you need to first select a poem. You can use these resources. This is a document you can find on Schoology. And of course, there's a few poets we'd like you not to use. There is a poetry analysis then on Schoology. It's an assignment that looks something like this. And people have said this is really an easy assignment to complete. So I hope it's easy for you. There's not a lot to do. You just want to make sure that you're telling me what poem you have, thinking about the mood of the poem and how that mood shows up in the poem, and then thinking about some figurative language stuff on the bottom of it. There's also a rubric if you want to kind of check that out. Along with that, you're going to want to make sure that you have a copy of the poem, or you're able to read it from somewhere on our day of our coffee house, which again is March 15th, coming up next week. So make sure that you have become comfortable reading that poem. You could even memorize it if you want. There are a lot of tips here that you may want to follow. So take a look at that on that assignment. And there's also a rubric and stuff for the poem performance and the analysis again here. If you want to just kind of see that before next week, you'll want to make sure that you're doing the best you can to get that done. That'll be summative points. So thinking about that, hopefully you don't have any questions. If you do, please send me an email. We've got a poem today called The Charge of the Light Brigade. In just a minute, we're going to have everybody grab a textbook, and we're going to listen to this poem twice, I think, once with an audio and once with a video. This is a poem that I think you're going to see more of this rhythm in than some of the other poems that we've read. Rhythm is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. Rhythm that follows a regular pattern from line to line is called meter. So if you've seen like even some of those Dr. Seuss kind of books and poems, you might see that things rhyme and they seem to have some sort of pattern. That's the rhyme scheme. Meter is a little bit different and rhythm is a little bit different, but it's also a pattern. And so this example here comes from the poem you're going to read today. Flashed all their sabers bare, flashed as they turned in air. You can kind of hear the rhythm in how I read that, right? It's got that da 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 da. We've got that kind of beat that's behind these lines of poetry. And so following that pattern, if you see a poem that kind of has the same rhythm throughout, that's what we would call meter. And this is, again, stressed and unstressed lines of poetry. So just naturally when we speak, we kind of have a certain cadence to our voice, and sometimes we emphasize certain syllables and others we don't emphasize. And poets try to really intentionally do that in their poetry as well. So flashed all their sabers bare, flash as they turned in air. There's some syllables that I'm emphasizing and others that I'm not. And just kind of how I would naturally read it. And poets try to do that. We have another example here. The wind was a torrent of darkness among the gusty trees. The moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. You hear that kind of stressed and unstressed lines of syllables. And, if you really get into poetry, you'll do these kind of markings for those syllables. We're not going to ask you to do that. This kind of indicates what are the stressed syllables and what are the unstressed syllables. So as you read this poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, just kind of notice the poem's rhythm and meter, and maybe think about the effect that creates for you as a reader. This is also a narrative poem, so you're going to see that this kind of tells the story. It's got some characters, maybe. It's got a setting for sure, and it has a plot. And you're going to get started with that as you grab a textbook. On page 584, I'm going to ask our guest teacher to read some of this background information, and then you're going to listen to it and then watch a video about it as well. As you read this, also think about the mood. We've talked about mood with this mood wheel, so that might be a helpful tool to remember as you think about mood. There is a formative assessment that you're going to do on Schoology once you are done reading the poem as a class, and you'll see that on Schoology. I'd like you to complete that before you get working on, again, that summative assessment. Okay, that should be it. Thanks for listening, and thanks for your patience, and let's go do good work.